Hello and welcome to the A&P. I am Alex Johansson and my co-host Patrick McCallum. Patrick,
Hello, everyone. How are you getting on?
we're having logical discussions about the state of the world. Let's get into it, brother. Heyo, Patrick, what you got for me today, bud?
Well, we were talking about this video here the other day, and we said we might as well do it on the channel.
Sounds good to me. So this is
Yeah.
Raymond Ibrahim with Winston Marshall. We have a 11 or 12-minute video about the untold history of the white slave trade and how Islam conquered 3/4 of the Christian world. Okay.
Yes. It's an interesting time period. Actually, one of my favorite time periods actually around this. It's really, really important actually.
So
Young
you
people
were
look into
telling me
this time
you
period.
studied a lot of this stuff at university?
I dipped into it in university on my own time, and we did it also quite a bit of it when I was doing my junior cert
Oh,
many moons ago.
your junior cert.
Yeah. I presume you have a junior. No, you don't. Do you have a junior cert in the United States?
I'm not aware of a junior cert, sir. What is a junior cert?
Okay, so you have a like high school.
Okay. The
Okay,
junior
so
year
you
is the
have
11th year of schooling. It's a secondary schooling, yeah.
yeah. So it's split into two halves. So the first 3 years is your
Mhm.
junior cycle. You do at the end of those first 3 years in secondary school in Ireland,
Uh-huh.
and actually a lot of the European countries have the same kind of structure roughly. You
Mhm.
do a junior cert. So like then it's the next 3 years you go do your leaving cert, and then you go into university. So you have two
Ah,
exams in secondary school, two major exams.
got it. So for us, our 9th, 10th, 11th year is freshman, sophomore, junior year. And then our fourth
Okay.
year of secondary school or high school is your senior year. From there, you get to go on to university if that's the decision you make by either going to a junior or
All
community
right.
college or a 4-year university, or doing 2 years at a junior or community and then doing your junior and senior year at the 4-year college, as it were, the university or
Oh yeah, we
state
have.
state
Oh
college.
yeah, we have something similar. We have post leaving cert courses as well, like junior colleges you call them. Yeah, we have the same system over here as well.
There you go. Well, let us
Yeah.
let Mr. Ibrahim cook. Mr. Ibrahim,
Okay.
here we go.
We're now nearing to what traditionally was called the Dark Ages, which, by the way, and we can get into, is a product of Islam. Many people don't know this. The Vikings, people don't even understand that a lot of the Viking raids, especially for slaves, okay, white slaves, was to feed the Arab slave emporium. And historians have actually quantified it, but it's basically they conquered 3/4 of the original Christian world permanently. Now, here's the first interesting thing that few people.
Those are a lot of heavy claims,
Yeah,
Patrick. That's
actually, historically, quite a lot of what he's saying is true. Leading up to this, the Roman Empire was split into two halves: Eastern and Western Roman Empire.
right. And then the Eastern
One is
eventually
what we
becomes the Holy Roman Empire. But wasn't there a
uh,
crux at 632 to 636 time frame?
so what happened is they split in two.
Mhm.
I'm just going to shorten the version
Okay.
that he's going to go into in a moment. So what happened is they split the Roman Empire in two. So there's two empires then in this time period.
Right.
So
Approximately what year was that?
when you were talking about the Byzantine, you're talking about the Byzantine Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So the Byzantine Empire itself, it came under 555, so
Okay.
around that time period, where
Mm.
it really kind of came into its own. But it's split in two because basically Romans couldn't stop killing each other. It was the shortest version of that. They had a few civil wars. There was a lot of pressure from tribes outside the Roman Empire pushing in as well at the same time. So they decided instead of going to another civil war, to decide to split the empires. There's a lot more nuanced history behind it, but that's the shorter, as they say, break it down Barney style
Mm-hmm.
version of it.
Right. Right.
They split in two at this time period. So what he's concentrating now it would be around the Byzantine Empire at the time.
Okay. So the Eastern Roman Empire. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
People understand. And 632, if I talk to someone, your average person, and I talk about the Middle East or North Africa, and they know it's Muslim, they don't know how it got Muslim. They think it's always been Muslim. In the dawn of Islam, during this time that I'm discussing, 632 and so forth, the Eastern world, Egypt, Greater Syria, as it was called, which encompassed modern day Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, it was a big chunk, Anatolia or Turkey, what we call Turkey. And like I said, Egypt, all the way down to Morocco, Mauritania, and Augustine's Hippo was there in Tunisia. All that was actually more Christian than Europe.
So Mauritania is on the western side, Northwest Africa, right underneath like
Yeah.
Morocco, right? So
Yes.
he's
Think of
saying
North
that it
Africa along
extends
there.
from functionally south of Morocco all the way east up to where is currently Syria, Jordan, and then it kicks
Yeah.
back up around over the top side, right?
Yeah. Because
Anatolia, Italy, and then across
this
towards
time
Spain.
period, Christianity was the main religion in the Rome, as we know of the Roman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
both the Eastern and the Western. So it was the more dominant of all the religions
Okay.
in the empire at the time. So it's spread all across North Africa, all around Spain. What we know is most of the Western world at this stage,
Mm-hmm.
around the Mediterranean, especially, was more dominant of all the religions. There was other religions in the Roman Empire at the time. There's Judaism. There was also around this time a lot of prophets rose up. Different micro religions like Muhammad at the time now was rising up,
Mm-hmm.
and he around this time in that particular region as well in the Middle East.
Right.
He was one of many prophets at the time, by the way. That's not just Muhammad, but he was the more prevalent because he soaked in a lot of the other tribal traditions around him at the time,
Right.
like Christianity, Judaism, and so on, to kind of bolster his own following and religion.
Got
But
it.
the main turning point is the major battle he's going to talk about right here. Is where he predicted a major victory, and there was a major victory. If
Right. So he's
yeah,
like Nostradamus, kind of. Okay.
yes, it would, well, well, the Byzantines probably thought they were going to win it, but it was a long battle. It wasn't. When people think of ancient battles, they think they last, they clash, and that's it. It's over. They're long, prolonged. This battle that he's going to come up now in a moment, it was fought over the course of 5 days. So it wasn't just one big engagement and it was over. I think a lot of people didn't realize a lot of ancient battles took a lot of time. If you know what I mean? They would engage, pull back, engage, pull back, engage, pull back. So a
Right.
lot of micro engagements.
All right. Well, let's let him cook.
So if you talked about Christianity at the dawn of Islam, you were talking about Egypt, you were talking about Syria, you were talking about Asia Minor, Greece, of course, and Europe. But Europe was actually less Christian. And of course, anything northwest of the Danube Rhine was still not even Germany. The Scandinavian lands hadn't even reached Christianity at that point. And this is why the Roman Emperor Constantine moved the capital of Rome, New Rome, Constantinople.
Look at that. Okay. So
Yeah.
you can see
So,
the outline.
yeah, you can see the outline now of the Byzantine Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So
Got
that's
it.
what you have to remember. This was roughly the outline for the next couple of 100 years as such. What happened was a lot of this part was still under Byzantine control. A lot of what we know as modern Turkey was still under Byzantine control, but it wasn't under Christian control. Christianity, after this battle, started being pushed out with a new religion at the time, which we know now as Islam.
Got it. Wow. That's pretty interesting. All right.
To the east, because that's where everything was. That's where the learning was. That's where the sophisticated culture was, the wealth. All right. And again, when people, we have records of people traveling through Egypt, and they say all we heard from the top of the Nile to the bottom is just hymns and church bells, etc. This is before Islam. Same thing with Syria. Okay. So people miss this context. This is what the Middle East was. If you wanted to talk about Christianity, there were 5 major centers. Okay. They call them Sees. One was Rome, and the other 4 were in the Middle East. Okay. One was Alexandria, one was Antioch, one was Jerusalem, and then later Constantinople, all east, and
Yeah,
all
if you
conquered
notice,
by Islam.
the reason why they were so important at the time, there were also major shipping ports.
So serious
Like,
economic centers, right?
yes, you're talking about massive economic centers around the Mediterranean at the time.
Right.
Like Alexandria, you're talking about the lighthouse of Alexandria and so on. There were major trading ports, also major learning areas where different cultures could meet and exchange ideas and so on.
Right.
And also religion and spread out from here as well.
Right.
All east, and all conquered by Islam. Okay, which we'll get into. So anyway, we have the first major attack, and we have the Battle of Yarmouk in 636, and the Muslims prevail.
Where is Yarmouk?
Yeah, Yarmouk is a river in Syria, or it was in Greater Syria at the time, so I don't know if it's in part of Jordan now, but I'm pretty sure it's in Syria still. And that's where the two major armies, the Eastern Roman Empire, which they call Byzantium. I sort of don't like that word because it sort of creates a discontinuity between the Roman Empire.
So the Eastern Roman Empire was the Byzantium Empire. When did it start
Yeah,
having
yeah.
that
I
moniker?
know he doesn't like the name, but that's the name they picked for themselves. So
Was that in
well,
555 when Justinian
yeah,
Justinian was
yeah.
in charge? Or
yeah, they decided to. I wouldn't say rename them. Rebrand is probably the word you could use.
so they're Romans, but they're also Byzantians.
Yes, yes. So I know a lot. I don't know why he has such a problem with that, but they were. That's the empire they became properly known as, and that's who they described themselves as. So.
Well, didn't the Holy Roman Empire come from the Byzantine Empire eventually?
No. The Holy Roman Empire. Think of the rise of what's the emperor's name? Charlemagne.
Oh,
So
Charlemagne.
Charlemagne up in Germany founded this. Became more. Charlemagne came into power to battle against Islam, because Islam at that stage, Charlemagne was pushing through from Spain into what we know as modern France now. So there's a series of battles there as well in France.
So that was West Francia at the time, right?
Yeah, around that area. There's probably, if you have ever played Crusader Kings, you'll probably see it. If you play from the 1066 start, it's probably the best way. You will see a decision where you can found the Holy Roman Empire. That time period around.
So yeah, Crusader Kings 3 gives a lot of really amazing geography and actual persons that were there. Like I've actually done this where I've gone into, I think it was Crusader Kings 3, where I just look up all the people that they have in there and then check it against like the history. It's really good. It's really good.
You have to remember one great thing about Crusader Kings. They hired proper historians to put in the right leaders in the right time period.
You hear that, Paradox? We're plugging your game. It's actually a pretty darn good game.
By the way, you're the one who got me into Crusader Kings. Just
hey.
And I'm the one who described the history to you.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Well, it's fun.
By the way, this is a shout out to the American education system. Do more ancient history. It's very important.
Oh my goodness.
Really important, and as we'll see now at the moment.
They saw themselves as Romans. Even the Arab accounts call them Romans, so this word Byzantine, anyway, but it's short, it's easy, it's succinct. So I interchange them, but the Eastern Roman Empire, basically, and the Arabs, the Muslims, fought there, and it was a major epic confrontations, and the Christians lost. And for various reasons, among it, there was a desert storm, which they weren't used to fighting in, whereas the Arabs were. And it takes on a great, it's very hagiographical tradition amongst Arabs. This is, where it all begins, and this is where Allah proved he was for us because we beat the infidels, etc., etc. And, I won't get into it, but anyone who's interested really should read about the battle, because a lot of what, ISIS, the Islamic State, the stuff they would say, which sort of sounds cryptic and people didn't understand it, they would say things like, we've tasted American blood and none is sweeter. And people just thought they're being gross. Actually, they were quoting characters from the Battle of Yarmouk, Muslim heroes.
Go ahead.
He's right there. A lot of the Islamic State and a lot of the organizations like it quote quite a lot of the things from this particular battle and future battles as time goes on. Yeah, there was a lot of hatred around the Roman Empire around this time period.
Were they not good stewards of the land or the people?
I think a lot of people see the romantic version of the Roman Empire, and they built a lot of roads and architecture, but it was also built on a lot of human labor, the way I could describe it.
Would you characterize it as unpaid labor?
Yeah, you can call it. Yeah, you can use that. I think people sometimes forget that the romantic version of the Roman Empire, yes, they were a powerful empire at the time, but they're also built on being brutal.
Right.
Like that's how they built an empire. There's, as they say, there's no subtlety when you build an empire. It's a very brutal business.
So they
Every
cracked
empire
lots of
built
eggs and made lots of omelets.
Yes, yes, and at this time, their empire was waning and collapsing in upon itself.
Right.
Specifically Khalid bin al-Walid, known as the Sword of Allah, who said to the Romans, "We've tasted Roman blood and none is sweeter." All right. So when a lot of the things they would say is actually from that battle and other battles as well, but that's how these battles and major confrontations with the Christian world where they prevailed still figure very prominently in their historical consciousness, whereas to most Westerners they have no clue. Right.
Yeah.
So at any rate, the battle happens. The West, the Christians lose. And now begins the great takeover of the Middle East. All right, Egypt, which was a
Yes.
major center for the Roman Empire, gets conquered 4 years later.
Does that look about right?
Yeah. So what happened, as you can see, as the both sides of the Roman Empire were collapsing in upon itself,
Mm-hmm.
it couldn't hold their lands in the east because, as you can see, even by the map, logistically, it was very hard for the Romans. Once they started losing their major ports like Alexandria and so on,
Mm-hmm.
you can't supply a military force without having a proper supply base, even to this time period.
Right. So they got locked out of
Even
their
in today's
ports.
army. Yeah. As you can see, they pushed along the coast.
Yep.
With the main economic centers. And the Romans just couldn't hold it. They just didn't have the manpower to hold on to their empire. As you can see, even up to this time period, the Byzantines even struggled to hold on to their slot of land, as you can see.
Right. How many legions did they have in that time frame?
Well, they split, according to historical texts, they split roughly the Roman army in two, roughly. But the Roman army wasn't just as we made up of what we know as traditional Roman legions. They were also made up of a lot of auxiliary legions, so local auxiliary troops.
Right. So I
No,
saw it. So
basically-
the actual legion is considered a superior force, and the add-ons or the cohorts were considered the inferior. But they were
Yes,
all one legion, right?
They're all one legion and a one man structure, you could say, but they all fought differently. That's why the Romans kind of learned mainly from later on, well past Caesar's time, that auxiliary troops were needed to bolster not just the numbers of the legions, but also give them local knowledge and fighting. Because the Romans were great at a lot of things, but they realized they weren't great at everything. So that's why they brought a lot of auxiliary cavalry was a prime example. They brought a lot of auxiliary archers and so on, specialized troops who were good at their jobs locally.
Right. And then you also get a taste for the local culture and a way to win the hearts and minds when you're not being brutal, I suppose.
Yes. Also, it's a lot of empires, even all the way through history, have always hired local forces to manage local affairs in their name.
Right.
So
a local magistrate who is from the local culture, but controlled from above by the bigger bureaucracy or the.
Yes. All empires are roughly structured the same way all through history.
Got it.
It's how you make an empire.
Apparently, there's a way to do it. They were pretty good at it.
Right, over 5 years, around 640, 641. And, they continue marching all the way west until they get to Morocco around 690. They take over Carthage,
Look at that. They got up into Europe. Whoa.
Yeah, because you have to remember, the Roman Empire was collapsing in upon itself to the point where Rome at this time period was already sacked, I want to say 3 to 4 times. Rome itself, the various tribes.
The barbarians were not only, at the gate, they were in the city, huh?
Yeah, the Goths at this stage already sacked it. A couple of tribes. Yeah, it's a really rough time period because I presume he'll go into this, but the most important thing that actually happened in this time period is papyrus was what was mainly used for writing a lot of what we know as ancient documents, Dead Sea Scrolls, and so on.
Right.
So the main country that was making papyrus is around North Africa, around Egypt, North Africa region. So
Okay.
that's where he'll go into. I presume he's going to go into, but he'll just led into a lot of the Dark Ages because they couldn't really write down ideas. There was a lot of libraries lost on both sides. There was a lot of upheaval, as you can see, because this was a collapse of a massive superpower. This is what it looks like, how quickly it can happen.
Right. Then
Once
there's
the
a
superpower
vacuum that
collapses.
someone fills, and in this case, it was the Muslims, right?
Whoever has the most military might will fill it in.
Right. Right. Someone's going to fill it in. So,
Yeah.
here we go.
And Augustine and Hippo, so all these major centers, and in Syria as well, completely conquered. Jerusalem is conquered 1 year after Yarmouk, right? It's like a complete domino effect. And there's theories of why this is. One of them is that the Byzantine Empire was very weakened at the time, but also the Muslims enter and conquer Persia, the Sasanian Empire at the time. Okay, and now it's now Iran's been conquered, and they continue eastward. But just to for brevity's sake, I'll continue focusing on the Western Christian world. And so now, so from 632, the year Muhammad died, 1 century later, 732, Muslims are now in the middle of Europe, fighting and abducting people and destroying churches.
Not just the middle of Europe. I mean, as far north as Tours in France.
That's why that's the date.
Yes.
732 is the Battle of Tours.
Yeah. They marched, as you can see, they marched straight through Spain to conquer Spain because most of its legions and defense forces were pretty weakened by various civil wars and so on within the Roman Empire. So there was very little military force there to meet them and stop them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They just marched straight through. Even as you can see, they started pushing into France, but there were various battles they were stopped.
All right.
It's a as I say, it's a shocking map. As he said, this is just over a century after winning that battle.
Well, it shows the area in yellow is the Muslim Empire as of 750, and that is massive.
Yeah. So you're thinking about just over a century later.
Yep.
They've marched all the way through from Jerusalem, all the way down through Alexandria, all through North Africa, right into Spain. Now they're literally trying to march into France, go deeper into open territory, but didn't quite work out too well.
Yep.
Which is right in the heart of France. Spain has been conquered since 711. Okay, now after they took over Morocco, now they sailed into Spain, and that was completely conquered and devastated. And now they're in the middle of France, okay, attacking, and this is the Battle of Tours. So in 1 year, in 1 century from Muhammad's death, and historians have actually quantified it, but it's basically they conquered 3/4 of the original Christian world permanently.
Wow.
In Spain, not permanently, but for like 8 centuries they were there. And of course, in France, they still continued depredations. And the Mediterranean islands were all conquered around the 8th century. Sicily and Malta and all of them, Cyprus and Rhodes, for centuries. And again, it's, to me, I'm just baffled at how people don't understand. These were not just Christian countries. These were the main Christian countries, and they just got conquered and Islamized, and nobody knows this. If you talk about those countries now, like Egypt or Syria, most people just have this vague notion they were always Muslim, and Islam spread there. No,
it wasn't spread in a friendly way, right?
No, it was conquered. The same way as that's how it's spread by conquest.
So at sword point, not with diplomacy.
Well, there's different type of diplomacy if you look at it.
The conversation soldiers.
The conversation soldiers, the conversation soldiers came in, and it was basically convert or else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at the sources, both the Arabic and Islamic and the European chronicles, they make it unequivocally clear this was violent, bloodshed, conquest. And it's even worse in the Arabic recordings because they boast about it. The more violent it is, and the more, the atrocities committed against the Christian infidels, and the more churches destroyed, this is more a reflection of how pious the Muslim conquerors were. So it's actually worse in the Arab I always find this amazing that it's more graphic sometimes than the European ones, which are a little more objective. They say, yes, we were attacked and thousands were butchered and enslaved in churches, but the Muslim ones revel in it. Okay. And
Yeah,
so now let's just stop for a moment. None of this is being taught in any school.
he's yeah, he's right there. Take a more of a stoic view of, yes, they marched in and slaughtered all around them and so many numbers, and we don't go into much graphical detail as other sources. As he was saying, more Islamic sources are paint a far more brutal. As he said, they revel in the slaughter and the mayhem at the time. As they
Not a
say,
fan.
it wasn't such a glorious battle when they were marching into Spain, where there wasn't many fighting men left to take up arms.
Right.
That's such a glorious victory when the other side can't really fight back. But that's the nature of empires. All empires are made the same way. So the time period.
At the tip of the sword, for sure. Here we go.
Oh,
Can I just ask, do you have a sense of the death toll in that first century?
no. I mean, these, unfortunately, 7th century is what we're talking about. We're lucky to have just the records that we have. But, and I know I put it in Sword and Scimitar where I talk about various regions that get conquered and then some chronicle mentions a number. Okay. But it's very hard. It's very sketchy that time. I mean, we're now nearing to what traditionally was called the Dark Ages, because we have, which by the way, and we can get into.
So there wasn't an Office of Vital Statistics to get all this information from, Patrick? Just wasn't there?
we can always. That's why I say when it comes to this time period, as he was talking about, we're into the time period of the Dark Ages, as it's more commonly known as. So records get a bit sketchy, is the word you could use.
A little muddy.
But you can roughly guesstimate. Like, we knew when the Romans had such and such a city, this was its population.
Right.
So we can roughly give and take that 2 centuries later, his population would have probably increased to this. So when they conquered it, they wiped everyone out in this city. We can roughly estimate how many people there. So it's all guesswork, roughly.
So they're wags. They're wild ass guesses with a little bit of
wild ass guesses, but they're there and thereabouts. When you're conquering major cities all around, you're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people being wiped out all across the world, as we know, all across North Africa into Spain. We're talking about a couple of 100,000 people easily.
Right.
Is a product of Islam. Okay, and when many people don't know this, and since I'm at it, okay, we're almost there. So basically, after what happened and so the Mediterranean used to be known as kind of the Roman lake, and everyone, Egypt and Syria and all of North Africa and Europe were all connected.
So
it was part of one empire.
What he showed there now is what we traditionally know is the height of the Roman Empire.
Right.
So this is the height of the Roman Empire. As you can see, it's the landmass it was controlling at the time.
Didn't quite get to Ireland, did they?
No. At the time of Hadrian just drew a line. Hadrian kind of roughly set up these borders. So Hadrian Wall, if you look it up, Hadrian's Wall is where the Hadrian said, this is as far as we're going to go, because even he realized you're kind of spreading out your legions everywhere.
Right.
So if there's any major rebellion, it's hard to kind of come together, if you know what I mean.
It's hard to quell that, right? For sure.
Yeah.
Egypt and Syria and all of North Africa and Europe were all connected. It was part of one empire. After Islam took everything basically south of that, North Africa and the Middle East, and I already told you that was the richer, more profound, the more sophisticated region.
Yeah.
Little Europe, the rest of the Christian was cut off completely. Papyrus ended. It used to come from Egypt. That supply was eliminated. All of that is historically, was the beginning of what historians would call the Dark Ages. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't know. I mean, and one historian, Henry Perrin, he was, I think, a Belgian historian in the 19th century, an Orientalist, as they called them. He actually had an entire thesis about this. And basically his line is, without Muhammad, there'd be no Charlemagne. The rise of Charlemagne and the Frankish state was basically a response to the nonstop Islamic aggression and the and the discontinuity.
Yeah. I'm glad actually you mentioned that part, because Charlemagne rose up, as he was pointed out correctly there, in response to the massive invasion coming out through Spain, not Africa, through Spain into what we know as France, Germany, and so on at the time. So Charlemagne rose up as a popular leader at the time, trying to bring everyone together, try to push back the aggression. So that's why he rose up. Actually, he did a really good job. Actually, pointing out bringing up this map actually actually the map work is absolutely fantastic. What he's showing here, it really kind
Right.
of illustrates how
That's
fast.
interesting. So the Bretons were an dependent territory. That's really interesting.
Oh, you're talking about the little part here of France?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, actually, that's if you're playing Crusader Kings, that's a good place to start.
He's pimping for the Bretons already. Look at you.
Yeah, so you can see the rise of Charlemagne all across here. I think people when I always tell young people look at ancient history, not just the Roman Empire, but different empires that came after it,
Mm-hmm.
to really understand the modern world where a lot of our modern countries and ideals come from.
Right,
Is
right, right.
around is from the ancient world. Of course, I think young people get that after the Roman Empire, there was other empires that arose after it that to this day
Oh,
affect the modern world.
Patrick, the world is just the way it is, because that's just how it is.
That's how it is on TikTok, apparently. Yeah, I've actually seen some good historians actually on. I've actually seen really good TikTok sent to me because a buddy of mine, he's a real history buff.
Mm-hmm.
There are some actually really good historians. I might joke about it, but there's actually some really good ones actually on TikTok who explain brief little good snippets of history.
Mm-hmm.
So if young people wanted to look that up, it's very important.
It's good to know these things. We repeat our
Yeah.
mistakes if we don't know what those mistakes were. So.
Yes.
The state was basically a response to the nonstop Islamic aggression and the separate and the discontinuity of the Mediterranean. This is why now Europe had to develop on its own and start anew. And it was, it was the young kid on the block, the barbarians who had, conquered and assimilated into Christendom in the 5th century and whatnot. They no longer had the assistance of the East as they did before.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now they became the small final bastion of Christendom, and they continued being attacked by Muslims. So, to finish this idea of the Dark Ages. So that's, so people will tell you the Dark Ages historic, and they don't even want to use that term anymore for various reasons, but they would say it was the 8th century and the 9th century. And they would tell you because of Viking attacks and, attacks from nomadic tribes in the East. But the real attack was Islam. Okay. That was the main one from the South. And,
and that was continued aggression for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years.
But, yeah, like I've seen a lot of historians kind of, he's right, kind of skip over the fact that there was non-stop attacks coming from Spain through a lot of, from Cyprus especially, a lot of pirate attacks on shipping and so on. There's all, as you said, later on, there's also Viking raids going on as well around.
Yeah, everybody's trying to get a piece of the action, right?
Everyone's trying to get a piece of that, as they say, a piece of the action. So it was non-stop attacks from all sides. That's why France, Germany, and so on are all around, as we know, as the Christian bastion at the time. Britain was also a Christian bastion at the time. We're so concentrated on constant warfare.
Right.
There wasn't much time to sit down and read a book. The only people who had really time to sit down and study any kind of learning were the priests, the nuns, the clergy class.
Right.
Because everyone else was trying to look after their own kingdom, trying to defend it from everyone.
Oh, right. You got to defend your lands.
Yeah.
And if you're busy fighting a war, you're not reading a book.
Yeah. Royalty, okay, a lot of higher nobles had access to books and read a certain amount. But still, it was constant warfare, constant trying to hold your lands from attacks from all sides. Because, as you said, the protection from the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantine Empire, they couldn't rely on that.
Right.
They had also cut off the access to the to the trade from North Africa,
Oh, wow.
which was known as the breadbasket of Europe at one stage,
Right.
which was Egypt.
Mhm.
Was the main breadbasket. So it was a lot of, as you said, cut off, isolationists trying to hold their lands together.
Right.
The Vikings, people don't even understand that a lot of the Viking raids, especially for slaves, okay, white slaves, was to feed the Arab slave emporium because there was such a demand for white slaves.
So they were selling, Vikings were selling.
Yeah, they would go to Ireland and England and France and wherever and conquer. And all those slaves, most of them would be sold down through the rivers of Russia to the caliphates, the Abbasids, for example, the Abbasid Caliphate. That used to be a well-known thing.
Go ahead.
That was a well-known slave route.
Mhm.
Was there, as he was pointing out there. So they would sell slaves all across our route,
Mhm.
whoever had the money.
Right.
They weren't too picky who they sold slaves to. It was just business to them.
Right.
So it was a lot of Arab countries around here. Because I think when they think of Islam as one empire, it was multiple empires fighting under one fate. It was all different empires. We'll say later on a lot of them become absorbed into the Ottoman Empire, but that's later on down the track, as they say. But
Right. Well, they're trying to develop a caliphate, right? So a religious
yes,
ruler.
it was a caliphate. That's what they called it. They called it caliphate at the time when they were pushing out.
Right.
But they weren't just one empire. People have to remember that it was multiple tribes fighting under one banner.
Right.
And later on, they'll come more so.
Right, and they fight amongst themselves even today. So yeah.
Exactly, that happens. So that happens in every major. Once they run out of steam and they hit a wall, which they hit in France, they sort of turn back in on themselves in a lot of ways.
Right.
Trying to nail down their own banners, as they say.
Yep, trying to get their piece of the pie there. Yep.
Yeah.
And we know this as well because a lot of the treasure troves of Viking coins that are found in Scandinavia are Arab coins. So what commodity do Vikings have to give? Slaves. And we also have records for it. So, the whole point is Islam has had a profound impact on the shaping of Europe. And there's historians, I quote one in one of my books, something Cardini, where he basically says Islam was a midwife to Europe. It created Europe. And the reason Europe became martial and you had the night culture and everything and a very staunch Christian kind of defensive posture was because of Islam. It was surrounding it, and they knew what happened. They understood that 3/4 of Christendom was destroyed and conquered and Islamized. This is we haven't even reached the Crusades, okay? And look what Islam had done. And I'm here to tell you, because I've looked at this, and parents write to me about school books, textbooks, and social science books. What I just described to you doesn't even get any mention. You just get one sentence about how Islam spread through trade in the Middle East, and they won't tell you the Middle East was so Christian before.
Well, they were trading swords for debts, right? That's
yes. It's like most faiths. Okay, it does spread through trade, but I think a lot of historians, I wouldn't say they ignore the facts. I think they gloss over it because they don't want to upset anyone. History is history. I've always said to people, history is history, good or bad. But you should never try to wash it away with nice words. History is what it is.
Right. It is the things that occurred. It's not. We're not going to talk about this. It was a cultural takeover. No, not a lot of cultural taking over. Just a lot of killing, and then now my people are here.
Yes, and that's and what people don't understand when you say that. They took it on. They took over most North Africa. They marched in. I said they slaughtered their way through, and that's all we know. And they, like he said, they tried. I said no, that's the way empires are built.
Right.
The Romans did it before them, and so on. How every empire is built.
Yep.
There's no kind of washing that away.
It's not a friendly thing, building an empire.
No, it's not. No.
Well, you have to displace other people, and those people get a little put out when you're like, you got to go. I don't want to go. Yeah. Well, you're dead. Oh, yeah, about that.
Or that they always like to act like Europe was Christian, and everything else wasn't. No, Europe was the leftover portion of Christendom that never got conquered. Portions of it did, Spain and the Balkans later under the Ottomans. and we'll get into that.
If you enjoyed that clip from the
All right.
Absolutely. He did a fantastic job on that, in fairness. He did a good job. What he didn't touch upon was Muhammad rose up at this time period and so
Right.
on. I think he did a really good job, and as they say, breaking it down Barney style there.
That was very, very well done. And thank you for your piece of that information and what you know, Patrick. That was awesome. I appreciate that.
If you want, we should actually the Rise of Charlemagne actually might be a good one we might do in the future as well.
I like that. Sounds good to me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all stripes, like, subscribe, hit the bell, hit the button, do the things, and we will catch you on the next one. We have been the A&P Gents, and we are out.